Well, at least in the first game without Jonas Brodin, the Wild defense stepped up and helped the team win against the Kraken. We'll talk about that, the new dynamic duo of Matt Boldy and Jonas Brodin, and some shifting standings in the Central Division. All on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked on Wild.
What's up? What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of the conversation throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Sleeper. You can download the Sleeper app, use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us as we break down a win over Seattle. We'll take a look at how the Wild at least initially tried to fill the void left by Jonas Brodin getting hurt. And we'll take a look at the Central Division, which is there have been some interesting things that have happened in the Central here over the last week and change. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. We get our second consecutive victory Micheletti Monday as Alex Micheletti is joining us after a 3-0 win for the Wild against the Seattle Kraken. People were trying to find it on Twitter, trying to do some research, and the fact that the Vikings won 3-0 and the Wild won 3-0 is maybe a first in the sports world. Just an oddity that you have both games decided by the exact same score in completely different sports.
Yeah, you can't make it up. It's I said it on Twitter. It's so classic Minnesota sports, and no matter what, win or lose, they can always make you chuckle either way. So yeah, that was something else. You kind of saw this coming with against the Kraken. The Kraken the night before had to play a Tampa Bay team that can really tire teams out, and they went to overtime. And they lost in the overtime. Nikita Kucherov just with the dagger, which is unfortunate. And they lost Grubauer and Justin Schultz, so that was two huge injuries for them. And they have Burakovsky hurt too. So it's a Seattle team that's now winless in 8 straight games. So that was a one that the Wild really needed, and they really. Took it to them, and took advantage of some turnovers by them and buried them, and it was nice for Gus to get the shutout too.
Yeah, and the biggest question for the Wild heading into that game after we've got word that Jonas Brodin's going to miss, he's going to be out a while. The two biggest groupings I think that can help with trying to fill that void is what we saw in the game against the Kraken as Gustafsson picks up the shutouts. He wasn't tested a ton because this is just a game that both offenses kind of got suffocated in, and there were just so many block shots on both sides. But Gustafsson made great saves, especially when the Wild were on the penalty kill. And so your goalies can step up a bit to try to fill that void. But I was impressed by a lot of what we saw from the Wild defensively. I mean, Zach Bogosian back in the lineup, and he has probably his best game of the season. And just really, you could tell that he kind of wanted to be one of the guys that stepped up in Brodin's absence. Middleton was great, but it's a situation where you're not going to be able to do it like that every night, where you have 4 defensemen that basically are playing 85 to 90% of the ice time. John Merrill checked in at the beginning of the class and then went to the bathroom and never came back. 7 minutes, 50 seconds of ice time, and then Goligoski had 12. And it's great that those top guys, as you alluded to, it's great that those top level guys were getting 25, 26 minutes a night, but you could end up tiring people out if you just continue to run them into the wheel like that.
Yeah, you can't be doing that against Colorado, Dallas, Winnipeg. They were lucky to do it against Seattle, but I mean, Jake Middleton, love the guy, but him having to play 27 minutes, that's not sustainable just for the way he plays. I mean, he had 7 block shots tonight, which is, I mean, the ice packs definitely had to been going on the way home to Minnesota, but it's not sustainable for sure.
That being said, if you get Bogosian and Middleton to be kind of the two defensemen that step up their performance a little bit here with Brodin out, that's going to go a long way. Yep. But I think what would also go a long way is to finally get the guy that is with the team but hasn't played, to finally get him back into the lineup, get Dakota Mermis in,
right?
Because
solve a lot of issues.
Looking at some of the numbers on Money Puck for the looking at those pairings, I found it fascinating too. You had Goligoski and Spurgeon to start. They got 10 minutes and 5 seconds of ice time together in 5-on-5. Spurgeon actually played 7 minutes, 18 seconds with Bogosian as well. And then you had a little bit of the Merrill and Bogosian combo as also. So it seems like Hines, he said before the game started, that he was told that Goligoski and Spurgeon played well together. But ultimately, I think having only one of those guys in the lineup as opposed to having both of them is just the desirable outcome.
Yeah, I mean, you just by minutes distributed tonight, you could tell that Hines was like, we are not having John Merrill be on the ice in any important type of situation, or just where when the team was maybe a little tired, he's just not going to see the ice. And this is one that I think John Hynes knew they needed to win, just based on the way Seattle's been playing and all the injuries that they have. It's the classic trap. See the Star Wars gifts. But they they finished it off, and that's what's going to get them back in this this race, and trying to climb up over teams, is beating the teams that are less talented than the Wild. This is a lot more. There's a lot of talent that's there. They just have to put it all together. And make sure that the minutes are distributed at a good rate. Because against more talented teams than the Wild, they can't get away with it for sure.
Yeah, we've noticed, I think, now that we're in Game 7 with John Hynes, he's way more of an in-game tweaker.
Not even close.
Than he is like a game to game.
Mm-hmm.
And we finally saw a little bit of a tweak, and we'll talk about this here in a second. We saw a little tweak with the first and second lines going into the game, but it's fun to see him kind of chess match through games. Like he's somebody that is prone to just deploying different centers to try to win a face-off. He's not afraid to double shift. He double shifted Kaprizov against the Oilers all the way down the stretch in that game. And then John Merrill played, I think, 1 minute essentially in the third period. That was it. He's not afraid in game to say, okay, here's stuff that's not working. Here's stuff that is working. Here's stuff that we just need to abandon completely. And so I think that's something that should be encouraging for Wild fans, is that he seems like he's way more dialed in on like game flow stuff, as opposed to just, well, here are the line combinations we're going into this game with. Here are the D pairings. They're not going to change. We're just going to continue to relentlessly push and hope that somebody figures it out.
Yeah, 100%. And, he's not afraid to, if guys are upset or feelings, it's, like Bill Guerin said, it's about winning, that famous line. But, you know, it's desperate times for the Wild right now. I think a lot of it too is, guys were embarrassed
Yeah.
that Dean got fired. A lot of it could be, John Hynes and making, in-game, moves and that sort of thing. But, there's a lot of pride in that locker room too. And they were embarrassed. And you see Matt Boldy, it's just, it's incredible, the transformation. And, he saw his coach get fired and he knew, hey, I'm I'm one of the highest paid guys on this team. I know I'm young, but I have to produce, and he's clearly doing that now.
Yeah, and he's formed now with Joel Eriksson,
Yeah.
another inseparable, although I should say the only inseparable combination, because Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello ended up getting split up for the Seattle game. And so we'll talk about that and the continued search for the third member of the bands on that line combination. We'll discuss that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. You may have seen that we've gone back to premieres for episodes. There is a purpose behind that. It's because Locked On has created the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, giving you the biggest stories continuously with our great Locked On experts. So make sure that you head to Locked On Sports today on YouTube so that you don't miss out on the fun 24/7 all the time. Your team every day. Continuing today's episode with Alex Micheletti, a Victory Micheletti Monday. Let's talk about the dynamic duos for this Wild team. You've got Matt Boldy and Joel Eriksson, who are at this point inseparable. Both scored in the win against Seattle, and Boldy now 6 goals in his last 7 games. Joel Eriksson leading the team with 14 in the first 26 games of the season. He's on pace for 40. Just monster numbers that these two guys continue to put up. And somebody on Twitter, I think it was Ron on Twitter, said if not for Joel Eriksson and what he's done this season, Wild would be in a world of hurt because he's kept the ship afloat for most of the season.
Yeah, his contract, you want to talk about a discount. That that guy, he does everything for the Wild, and the lack of center depth. I mean, he fills so many holes, and he's so important to this team. If you were taking a look at this team and like the importance level, if you lose a Brodin and an Ek, I mean, just end the season. Those are the two most important guys on the team, and it's amazing. He just he continues to get better as he gets older, which is fantastic. And I can't say enough about Hines putting Zuccarello with Marco Rossi. I think that is so important too, because Zuccarello is such a smart player and he sees the ice so well. I mean, the play he made to Marco Rossi on his goal was just phenomenal. It's
Yeah.
it's amazing at his age that, and that late in the game too, that he made that and got it to Rossi A+. And then Boldy, what a fantastic move on his goal tonight. That just got the guys going, and that was so much fun to see. And then you see Eck, that's one guy you want to, if the net is empty, you want Eck out there because he's going to win the face off. And, you just, he plays such a 200-foot game. It's, he's the new age Koivu for sure.
Yeah, and the continued quest for trying to just find those optimal top two line combinations. I think one of the things that's been encouraging about Hines so far, and I talked about this in the postcast too. So not trying to super rehash, but it is a point that I think is important for the morning crew to keep in mind. All of our morning listeners, is the fact that Hines hasn't tried to force any of those Dean pieces into the top six. We haven't seen Freddie Gaudreau put into one of those spots yet. We haven't seen Ryan Hartman put into one of those spots. And Hines just continues to allow for guys like Marco Rossi to continue to get those types of spots. I know it's been a little bit of a quiet last couple of games for Rossi. Some struggles, on the ice, but credit to Hines for not panicking and saying, we need to drop him down in the lineup because he's not playing as well, and realizing, hey, he's a young player. We need to let him continue to do his thing and find his way through it. And he does. And then he goes and scores a goal tonight.
Yeah, he stuck with it. It was a quiet beginning to the game, but he just kept working, and he saw him get a couple of shots on goal. And then, like I mentioned, anytime you're out there with Matt Zuccarello, that's he's gonna feed you the puck and find ways to impact the game. Even though it looked like Zuccarello was quiet for a lot of the game too, but he was there when they needed him the most. And for Marco to get that, to give the team a 2-0 lead is huge. It seemed to just demoralize, the Kraken, and from there you knew they weren't scoring. So it was nice to see Marco get the dagger for sure. That's a huge confidence boost.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder now, because I know Johansson was on the second line. And so technically was part of that goal for Rossi. But I mean,
that brother is doing cardio out there a lot. He's just he's just skating, and that new no movement clause is just it was like an early Christmas present for him.
Yeah, it's like when you get socks for Christmas, and you're like, oh, sweet. I'm so happy that unless it's a really comfortable pair of socks, and then you're like, awesome. That's been a funny thing as I continue to get older and older, to where when I was a kid, stuff like that would really bum me out. And now here I'm like, it's a few pairs of socks that I didn't have before. And so I'll take it. But yeah, it's
the same performance over and over and over.
It is. And the things that are most problematic is being able to catch a team off balance, which is, again, that's one of the Hines trademarks since he took over, is trying to create turnovers and trying to create opportunities where you catch the opposing defense off guard. Johansson had one. He flew into the offensive zone, was basically by himself, and instead of trying to get a shot on Joey Decord, he just skates it into the corner and ends up being nothing. Not even, there wasn't a pass opportunity because he lost the puck in the corner, as opposed to just driving the net and at least trying to get a shot on goal. It ends up that Seattle takes the puck back and you have just an empty possession in the offensive zone. And there's not much left up here, but I did pull some out when that happened, because I don't think this team can afford to be passing up those types of opportunities.
Yeah, especially when you're in the top six. I mean, you're getting prime time minutes, and it's amazing that they can still be productive with him doing nothing. That, like I said, it goes to show how valuable Zuccarello has been this season too. It's just no matter who he plays with, or if there's an anchor, he still gets it done, and finds a way. So I don't know if it's sustainable the entire season. It's crazy, and it doesn't seem like that he should be rewarded at all. He's not doing it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's not ideal, but we'll see, because again, that line scored and the Kaprizov, Boldy, Eriksson line scored. And so I would imagine we see that on Thursday against Calgary. And, again, that's fine, because like I alluded to, we're seeing way more in-game adjustments. And so just because line combos are what you go into the game with doesn't mean you see them all throughout the game. So Hines, I feel good about the pulse that he has on this team, and that he's going to, in late game situations, he's going to maximize the guys that are playing the best in the critical spots. And that's the important thing.
Yeah, and another thing with upcoming game against Calgary, that's another team that's just like Seattle, and they aren't going to have their starting goaltender because Grubauer got hurt. It's the same thing. No Jacob Markstrom, most likely, for Calgary, and so you either get we always joke Darth Vader, Darth Vladar, or Dustin Wolf. So it just they aren't gonna be at 100% either. And Calgary, you thought maybe getting rid of Sutter would help, but their issues are still the same. Their highest paid guy, Huberdeau, is not. They're not getting what the same guy that was in Florida, and so that's another team that you can take advantage of. And we saw it the other night too when the Wild played them. So hopefully they can have a repeat performance against them.
And this is how you pull yourself back in, because ironically enough, the two teams that are currently in front of the Minnesota Wild in the Central Division standings, they've hit the skids. And so we'll talk about the shifting sands in the Central Division lineup as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by Sleeper. A new NHL season is full of all sorts of possibilities, whether it be Marco Rossi scoring the game-deciding goal, Joel Eriksson continuing his quest for 40+, or at some point down the line, the Minnesota Wild hoisting a Stanley Cup of their own. You can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether top-tier players like Connor McDavid, Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, or Nathan McKinnon will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, or if you're picking goalies, saves, also plus-minus, and more during a given game. It's that easy. You just have to pick more or less. You can fill out your entries in less than 60 seconds. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends so that you can join in on the conversation on the daily, especially on YouTube. But we also love to get interaction with our audio listeners, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be on social media, wherever you take in Locked on Wild. We thank you for doing so. Alex, let's talk about the Central Division, because there have been some interesting things that have happened. And I know Winnipeg was able to hang on and win that game, to come back, that is. But obviously a big blow for the Jets. I would imagine they lose Kyle Connor for a while, considering how that looked. And so you have the Jets, who are currently in first place, but they're going to have to fill a really big void themselves. And the teams that are in front of the Wild right now, St. Louis and Arizona, starting to trend downward. And so this underscores these next two games against Calgary and Vancouver. You would love to have those games at home so that you can try to continue to take advantage of the teams in front being on a little bit of slippery ground, so that you can make up some of these points that you didn't get in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, 100%. You know, the Vancouver just they're a wagon, so that's gonna be tough. But Calgary can definitely take advantage of, and then you just try to get a point against Vancouver. Grind it out. Yeah, make up some of these points, and especially when they were losing to some teams that they shouldn't have been losing to. So, this another critical week for the Wild, and continue to let other teams just kind of self-destruct. We talked off air, but just about the Blues and Bennington can just be just an absolute roller coaster. And, it seems like, Arizona is just, I don't know, they have, luck coming to them, and it's starting to run out. So, and then, Nashville too, it's, they can be such a mess. So, continue to take advantage and slowly work their way up.
So here, I like to look at goal differential because that can help tell you about which teams are legit contenders and which are not. If you look at, for instance, the Pacific Division, you've got three teams that have a plus 30 or better goal differential. Vegas is at plus 31. Vancouver's at plus 34, and the Los Angeles Kings are at plus 32. So I think it's safe to say that Pacific is locked in.
They're
loaded. Because the next closest in the Pacific is Edmonton at plus 4. But then after that, you have Calgary at minus 15, Seattle at minus 27. Gross. Anaheim is at minus 21, and the San Jose Sharks are at minus 54.
That's ridiculous.
So it seems like the Pacific is pretty well locked in. And then you look at the Central. Winnipeg's at plus 15. Colorado's at plus 12. Dallas is at plus 8. But Nashville's at plus 1. The Arizona Coyotes are at plus 9. And then St. Louis is at minus 12. Yes, Minnesota is at minus 7, but they continue to make up ground in that department. And so if you look at one of those two teams that is directly in front of the Minnesota Wild, the fact that the St. Louis Blues are at 13-14, technically 13-13-1, but overtime losses are just losses that take longer. 13-14 with a negative goal differential, that tells you that if that continues to trend, that St. Louis is going to continue to drop. And so you're looking at trying to fight it out now with Arizona and Nashville. And like you said, it's Nashville is trying to kind of stay above water. Arizona has lost 2 in a row. St. Louis has lost 3 in a row. So go hop those teams, go leapfrog them, and get yourself into potential 4th place spot in the standings, and just methodically start to climb back out of the hideous hole to start the year.
I think a big key too that I was thinking about this is a lot of those teams, they only have one goalie really that you can rely on, and the 1A or the one. Some of these teams, I think they're just overworking their goalies too, and so you see them come out flat, and I think that's this season has just been so strange because you think, hey, these weaker teams they have no chance, and then you see San Jose win a game, that they have no business winning, but I think it's just either goalies overworked or you have and then you have your backup come in that is clearly probably not NHL level, but that's what they have right now. And you're seeing that with a couple of teams for sure, like that Hoffer guy or whatever for the backup for St. Louis. He's horrendous. Lincoln in from Nashville, he's nothing pretty. In Colorado, I feel bad for Georgiev because I think he's a pretty good goalie, but they overwork that poor guy. It's too bad.
Yeah, it leads to situations where like now you're seeing Dallas this year try to be more selective with Ottinger starts, trying to make sure that they don't go to him as many times as they have, because
Right.
you don't want to run a guy out of gas early on in the season. And I mean, it makes me think of what happened with UC Saros last year with Nashville, where he's starting almost every night
Yeah,
and
you
is
can't.
facing
It's not
just
sustainable.
is facing just absurd amounts of shots, hanging on for dear life, trying to keep the team in winning games. And so, I know we have griped a lot about the 1A, 1B for the Wild. It does
It's
seem
ideal.
like
It's
yeah,
ideal when you look at goalie partnerships, and hey, it's not bad when you have a future Hall of Famer and marc-andre Fleury as your 1B. Colorado would take that. Dallas would love to have that because
yeah.
as much as Scott Wedgwood, I don't see that helping Jake Ottinger.
No.
Yeah, it's just not ideal.
So, moral of the story here is take advantage. You got these two Western Conference teams, West Coast teams. I was right the first time. They're still in the Western Conference, but they're on the West Coast. You've got these two at home. And so take an opportunity here before this weird now East Coast swing again with Boston, with Pittsburgh, with Montreal. Um, Take these two winnable games, and if you can come out of here with 3 out of 4 points before you head back on the road on Monday, I think you feel again pretty good about where you're at.
Yeah, 100%. And if we take a look, that Edmonton game, that was you want to talk about a brutal back to back. Vancouver going and then into Edmonton. I mean,
Ugh.
it's that's tough. I mean, the way Vancouver played, last night too, beating the Hurricanes. They're rolling. So that's tough, but it's nice to get that that win coming home. I think the guys feel good about themselves and ready for another week of games here coming up. And we both you and I have joked about that Montreal game earlier in the season, and it'll be I'm sure the Wild will look forward to playing Montreal
Ugh.
again, get some cookies, get a stat pad for sure.
Yeah, maybe an opportunity to score 5 special teams goals or whatever. Maybe the reverse Dallas. How about that? The reverse Dallas, get that evened out against
Get 7.
Montreal.
Yeah.
It'd be nice. We'll talk about that as we get closer. But for this week, just Calgary and Vancouver on the schedule, and so get some points. Continue to climb in because the teams in front of the Wild, the immediate front, objects in the mirror, are closer than they appear. That'll do it for today's episode. Appreciate everybody listening as always. Make sure to hop in on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you can join in on the conversation all week long as part of Locked on Wild. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.